In this video, I'm going to take a look at the weapons in Apex Legends and give my opinion on which ones are best for different scenarios. There are some weapons you should stay away from, and some you should certainly look to pick up if you see them lying around. Some weapons are perfect for certain situations, whilst others favour different playstyles, so I'll try my best to mention exactly what the weapon is good for as we go through the video. Starting off, we have, in my opinion, the strongest weapon in the game right now, and probably the first to receive some sort of balance. I'm of course talking about the Wingman. High skill, high reward, although in saying that, you are also rewarded for hipfire spamming this into enemy players. Great at most ranges, but of course you need a scope of sorts to see your target, but the iron sights will also do if you can't find one. A heavy mag is important to up your maximum rounds in a magazine to 12, meaning you can take out multiple enemies, especially when they're running with shields, and the gold digital threat scope is of course my favourite. A skull piercer hop-up will increase your damage when headshotting enemies, bringing it up from the 90 base damage. If you've watched any of the top streamers use this Wingman, they are absolutely dominating, and you will know exactly what I'm talking about. There are certain people out there that will just take the Wingman and nothing else, proving how good it actually is, as it can do pretty much everything. Next up, we have a weapon that I think is incredibly good in CQB, albeit fairly frustrating if you don't manage to get the pellets to hit. I'm of course talking about the Peacekeeper, an insanely strong weapon at closer ranges, and with some luck you can do up to 110 damage to the body and 165 damage to the head. All of your pellets have to hit for that to happen, and it's not that consistent, but at close range the hipfire is brilliant, and most players will be taking this for CQB engagements. Easy to find ammo for, and perfect for any close range engagement. The Peacekeeper is a no-brainer for anyone looking for a shotgun to use in those close range fights. A precision choke reduces the spread of the pellets, meaning you can hit enemies more consistently when aiming down the sights, as the weapon almost charges up, becoming more accurate. It's a solid pick and a great CQB weapon. Third on the list, we have the R301. Now, I'm not ranking these weapons from best to worst, but the first three that I have mentioned are my favourite in the game. The R301 is the easiest AR to use, it's easy to find ammo for, and very nice to find headshots with. Now, the reason for this is, on PC at least, the recoil is essentially non-existent, and it's almost like a laser beam. If you can find all of the attachments, and there are a few you need for the R301 for it to be at its very best, including a stock, barrel stabilizer, sights, and a magazine, you can turn this gun into possibly the best gun in the game, excluding the Wingman, that I think has to be in its own category right now. The R301 is good at lots of different things. If you put a larger scope on it, you can spray enemies at range. In CQB, you can almost hipfire an enemy without even thinking about aiming down sights. It's good at pretty much everything, and anyone who's used it will know it's a solid AR. It's definitely my favourite assault rifle in the game. Is it my favourite gun? I think the Wingman has something to say about that. Next up, we have the G7 Scout, many people's favourite sniper, and in my opinion, the best sniper in the game, bar the Kraber. 60 for headshots, spammable, a solid pick. Now, the reason I think it's one of the best is down to a simple factor: its ease of use. The G7 Scout is a very easy weapon to use, purely down to the fact you can spam it at enemy players, landing a couple of shots in a row, and if the first one's a headshot, the second couple should knock your enemy. Now, the difference between the G7 and, say, another sniper, or a DMR in this case, but a weapon that's used at range, the longbow, the G7 Scout uses the light ammo and is very good to complement a Wingman, and I usually take the Wingman in my primary slot, and that uses heavy ammo. Having two different ammo types is quite often important in Apex Legends, as sometimes you'll run out of one or can't find one, and then you have to rely on the other. It's also a pain for your team if you're taking one ammo type and you're constantly requesting it. This is why some weapons on this list, and I'll just link to one, the Devotion, that we'll get onto a little bit later, is in fact a fantastic weapon in certain circumstances, but the fact it uses energy ammo renders it quite difficult to use, especially if more than one player in your squad is taking one. G7 Scout, as I said, a great weapon. Definitely take it if you're looking for some longer range engagements, and a weapon that's fairly easy to use. Moving on to another weapon that you can use at range that is in fact a little more difficult to use in my opinion, we have the longbow. This one uses heavy ammo and will do a lot of damage with headshots. 110 damage to the head I believe, which is a huge amount. The problem with the longbow though is its fire rate. I find it really difficult to use, and although I have been successful with it in the past, especially on stationary targets, I don't really feel as if it does anything too much better than the G7 Scout, bar that extra damage for that headshot. You can use the skull piercer on this weapon, increasing that headshot damage, perfect for shooting stationary targets as I mentioned, but if you're trying to take out moving targets who are strafing and sliding all over the place, it can be very difficult. The big magazine is very useful, upping those 5 rounds as you'll definitely need them. As I mentioned, it's difficult to use and the slow firing nature of the weapon has just put me off it. If you can use it though, it's really good. The other sniper rifle in the game that I don't really enjoy using is the triple take. I don't think it's great at really anything. Because you get those 3 rounds that kind of go off in different directions, you can arguably use it as a shotgun in CQB without the hop up, but I don't really think that that's very good to be doing, especially with the amount of shotguns that you find around the map on Apex Legends. I would suggest if you are using it, going for the hop up and trying your best to charge it up and sniping enemies in the head for the maximum damage, but I do feel as if both the G7 Scout and the longbow will do a better job if you're looking for heavy damage or maybe a weapon that's easy to use. Moving on to a weapon that I've seen get a lot of hate recently, the EVA-8 Auto. I think it's quite an underrated shotgun. It's not terrible for those that push and spam left mouse button. It isn't anywhere near as deadly as the Peacekeeper with its one-shot capability, but it is very useful in early game, and it's certainly a weapon that you shouldn't be sleeping on. It's very good at certain things. If you've got a couple of enemies in a doorway that you need to power through, the EVA-8 Auto will do a great job. It might be good on console as well. I've never played on console with Apex Legends, but maybe this is a weapon that many people enjoy. On console things play slightly differently. Next up we have the Prowler PDW. It's pretty average when you first pick it up as the weapon is a burst, however with the select fire receiver hop up you can hip fire enemies in CQB using that heavy ammo. Use an extended mag to ensure you take down an enemy in one magazine. It's a solid weapon with upgrades, and the top tip, make sure you always switch your fire mode when you have that hop up so you're not going to be stuck on burst and surprising yourself in the first engagements that you find yourself in. Next up we have a really solid pick, the R99 SMG. This thing is insane in CQB if you hit your full magazine, but that's the thing, if you miss you tend to lose. The hip fire is strong, you definitely need a big magazine, and you'll lose in CQB to someone using a Peacekeeper or a Wingman if they hit their shots. That's just the nature of the game. That being said, it is incredibly good if you hit your shots. You can go for body shots and one magazine will take down an enemy on full shields, I believe, if you have the big mag in CQB. It's a very good backup if you run Wingman and only like to go in close quarters, and most people will probably team this with something like an R301 or maybe an M600. Sticking with that M600, I'm of course talking about the Spitfire. It's again a really solid weapon and does something that many other weapons can't do in the game, and that is sustain fire. It's good with the big mag and slightly longer range scopes, and it's also great for holding down a position whilst your team relocates due to that sustained fire. Enemies won't want to re-peek you when you just don't stop firing. Heavy ammo is very easy to find in the game. It's quite a nice one to have, one person in your team using, and I would say that it goes head to head with the Devotion, a weapon that I'll talk about next. The Devotion is only one of 2 weapons in the game that uses energy ammo and requires to be spooled up to get to its maximum rounds per minute. Using the hop-up turbocharger is really important as that speeds up the spool-up time and makes the weapon a whole lot better. However, you do fly through ammo, and I'd only suggest one person in the squad taking it. As it's difficult to find ammo for, I wouldn't suggest taking it if you are struggling to find that energy ammo, but if you have 300 sitting in your inventory, go for it. It's perfect for corridors or groups of enemies, and it is really good once you get it up to speed. It will rip through an enemy player, and if you land a couple of headshots, you'll be downing enemies before they even shoot back. Now for a couple of weapons that I don't really enjoy using much at all, but maybe you've found some luck with them. Firstly, we have the Hemlock, a 3-burst assault rifle that uses heavy ammo. Very strong if you can aim with over 100 damage with one burst of headshots, and on single fire it is again very solid, but I've never got to grips with it, and it doesn't do anything better than the R301. Next up we have the flatline. Again, I prefer other assault rifles. Not unusable by any means, but I prefer to use the R301 once again. Then, of course, we have the pistols. You'll be leaving these after early game, but they can be very effective against players with no shields right at the start. In all honesty, you'll be picking these up so quickly that you won't even check what you've got, but just make sure that you get the ammo and you set to work on enemies right from the get-go, linking in those punches as well to make sure that you down enemy players and don't give them a chance to get you instead. There are some guns that aren't exactly perfect in Apex Legends and require a lot of luck and possibly a bad enemy player to win a gunfight with, but then you have the Mozambique. This thing is just pure comedy gold. I like to think that you are genuinely better off punching an enemy to death than going to the trouble of picking up one of these low damage shotguns that will essentially tickle the enemy with its pathetic 3 shells before it requires reloading. Don't use it, end of story. What legend you're running is important to what weapons you choose to pick. If you're aggressive, take weapons that will fit that playstyle, for example a Peacekeeper and a Wingman. If you prefer to play cautiously, take weapons that will assist you, for example an R301 and G7 Scout. My best combos personally for me are the Peacekeeper and R301, the Peacekeeper and G7, and then we have the Wingman and R301, Wingman and G7, and Wingman and Spitfire. That's going with a Peacekeeper as a primary or a Wingman as a primary, as those things are really good in different situations. Another combo I've been trying out recently is the R99 and Wingman. You are limited at longer ranges, but again, my teammates usually tend to take a sniper, and that sort of covers us for those engagements. At the end of the day, it's down to what you prefer and what weapons are available. However, I do enjoy having a solid CQB weapon that can hold the gold digital threat scope, and then an automatic weapon with a bit more range. 1 or 2 players in the squad could do with a sniper of sorts, or maybe a weapon with a little more range on it. As I said, if I'm running with a Wingman and G7 Scout, I sort of take care of that, and my friendly players can maybe look for something a little bit different. Maybe they're running with a shotgun and an SMG, so we're really strong in CQB. Let me know in the comments what you're running in Apex Legends. What's your favourite gun in the game? Your least favourite's probably going to be the Mozambique, but apart from that, which gun do you just simply not like? Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.